Tonight,
there's no words for it, really. I mean, to me, this is stuff you see in history books. You see this right next to a cross or a noose, somebody hanging up, or, stuff you read about.
There are so many spots reserved for certain students. Either their parents have already given significant money to the institution or plan to.
Britain, Germany, and France have joined a growing list of countries that have suspended Boeing's 737 MAX 8 aircraft from their airspace, and at least 38 airlines have grounded their MAX 8s after 157 people were killed on a flight from Ethiopia to Kenya on Sunday. Boeing says it's planning a software update by April, but that it has full confidence in the safety of the airplane model.
So the noes have it, unlock!
Britain's parliament, once again, voted to reject Prime Minister Theresa May's plan for Brexit, despite May managing to get a last-minute concession from the EU. On Wednesday, Parliament will vote on whether a no-deal Brexit should happen. And if that vote fails, they'll hold another vote on Thursday on whether to ask the EU to extend the deadline for withdrawal, now only 17 days away. The Greek government is standing up to the Orthodox Church, backing legislation to allow a crematorium to be built on public lands in Athens. The country legalized the practice in 2006 as a fix for overcrowded cemeteries, but objection from the church delayed any construction, forcing those wanting to cremate their loved ones to travel over the border to Bulgaria. The CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods says 125 of its 729 stores will stop selling guns, period. The company already stopped selling guns to anyone under 21 last year after the Parkland shooting. And a test run to pull guns from 10 stores was a success. If this is too, CEO Ed Stack says more stores could follow.
Three weeks of protests in Algeria have pushed out the man who held onto power there for 2 decades and whose party has ruled for 5. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika declared Saturday that he won't run for a 5th term after the biggest protest since the country declared independence.
C'est l'Algérie, c'est un seul monde, un seul peuple et un seul but, Inch'Allah. Et je le sens que c'est la bonne. Je suis très positive, très positive.
Sara Beshatan is 25. Before these marches, she never thought she'd see this many people on the streets of Algiers. Demonstrations are illegal in the capital, but protesters have been coming out almost every day since February 22nd, shortly after Bouteflika said he'd run again. Two-thirds of Algerians are under 30 and don't have the same vision for their country as their 82-year-old leader, who hasn't even spoken in public for 6 years since he had a stroke.
Il a clochardisé la vie politique et la vie sociale et économique et culturelle en Algérie. Donc il faut qu'on finisse avec ces gens-là. Voilà, la relève, elle est aux jeunes. C'est un pays de jeunes et c'est inconcevable qu'il soit géré par des cheveux grisonnants.
من البلديات للمرادية لا تستيل شون إيمان.
Youth unemployment is at 30%, and many blame corruption in the government for the bad economy. The ruling Front de Libération Nationale party did help bring peace after a bloody civil war against militant Islamists. And Algerians no longer want what the party's selling. Riot police have mostly left demonstrators alone. In 3 weeks, only one protester has been killed. And it's only on the fringes, near the presidential palace, that police fire tear gas. News on Saturday that Bouteflika would not run again showed protesters they were getting somewhere. They want to keep going. Bouteflika's loyalists are still in power, and elections have been delayed indefinitely.
On est tous contents pour ça, mais c'est pas vraiment une victoire. C'est un pas vers la victoire, mais pas vraiment toute la victoire.
Power is slowly returning to parts of Venezuela after 5 days of massive blackouts. But much of the country is still without electricity or running water.
Estamos secuestrados en nuestro propio país. Este gobierno es una vergüenza.
Citing the deteriorating situation, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. will withdraw its staff from the embassy in Caracas. Schools are closed, and so are government offices. Hospitals are struggling to keep patients alive, and Venezuelans are struggling to meet their most basic needs.
Estoy criada en la parte de no permitir que se desperdicien los recursos. Como verás, hijo, esta es la nevera. Obsérvala, está completamente ya vacía. Mi nevera tampoco es una nevera tan grande que la tenga que llenar de tanta... Que se fuera luz el jueves, ya el viernes, porque esto no es una nevera que aguante tanto el frío. Distribuí lo que tenía para no botar los alimentos. Mi nombre es Luisa Changir, mi edad es 60 años, me dedico al comercio. Estamos sin luz desde el jueves pasado, ya bueno, tenemos 5 días y la situación ha estado bastante crítica para nosotros porque se nos han ido descomponiendo los alimentos, el agua viene por bombeo, no tenemos agua y otras cosas más, pues otras consecuencias, por ejemplo, yo soy diabética. Esa insulina me la trajeron de México, ¿viste? Pero bueno, dudo de que esté bien, pero de que tengo ya tantos días sin electricidad que no tiene la refrigeración que se indica. Por lo tanto, bueno, me las voy a poner a riesgo y bendiciendo a Dios, dándole gracias porque me llegó, me la trajeron y fue un donativo. Y los donativos ahorita son muy apreciados porque en Venezuela tú preguntas por insulina en una farmacia y lo que hacen es como reírse. Poder llegar a veces a mi casa en la noche es bastante difícil porque producto de la misma situación de salud se me dificulta ver y la oscuridad es peligrosa para mí. Según he oído, porque tampoco hay información de noticias, porque colapsó el Guri, que es la represa principal de donde surge la mayor cantidad de electricidad para nutrir a todos los estados. No tenemos una respuesta precisa de cuándo vamos a volver a tener con normalidad el servicio de la luz. En mi caso ha venido un ratico, se ha ido y ya fíjate, hoy estamos nuevamente sin luz.
President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, will be back in court again tomorrow. This time he'll be sentenced in D.C. District Court for the 2 counts of conspiracy he pleaded guilty to in September. Special counsel Robert Mueller brought the case, which stems from Manafort's work as a political consultant in Ukraine. In his plea deal, Manafort admits to conspiracy to commit tax fraud, money laundering, and other crimes, as well as conspiracy to obstruct justice by tampering with witnesses. D.C. Circuit Court Judge Amy Berman Jackson can sentence Manafort to as much as 10 years in prison. She has a lot of discretion, just like Judge T.S. Ellis had in Manafort's other case in the Eastern District of Virginia. In that case, Manafort faced up to 24 years in prison for 8 counts related to bank and tax fraud, but Ellis sentenced him to less than 4. That sent Twitter into a tailspin last week because Ellis's decision exposed the differences in the way federal law treats certain kinds of crimes. For white-collar crimes, judges like Ellis have flexibility. They're given sentencing guidelines but can use their discretion. But for some crimes, including drug and gun crimes, judges can be handcuffed by mandatory minimums, which stem back to the 1980s, when Congress and previous administrations were waging their wars on crime and drugs. Judges basically have to give harsh sentences to guilty defendants who are more likely to be Black and brown people, according to the government's own data. Ken White, a former assistant U.S. attorney who specialized in government fraud and public corruption, says bashing Judge Ellis for letting Manafort off easy isn't the right way to think about this.
The most tempting hot takes, like, this judge was completely biased, he was pro-Trump or anti-special counsel, are usually too simplistic and let the system off the hook. Here you've got a system where vastly fewer white-collar prosecutions happen because we put fewer resources into pursuing them, notwithstanding how much harm they can do. And then prosecutors use their discretion about how to charge them and what deals to offer. That is oftentimes different than the sort of discretion they show to people charged with drug crimes or gun crimes. So all these steps, they all conspire to sort of drive a system where there's a stark disparity.
Judge Ellis, for instance, used his discretion to give Manafort a 47-month sentence. But if a drug dealer gets caught with 100 grams of heroin or 5 grams of meth, he could catch a mandatory 60-month sentence. That's because Congress has basically deemed drugs way scarier than tax fraud, even though tax fraud disenfranchises all of us.
That reflects some social judgments that I don't think are particularly flattering for us. That there's something inherently much more dangerous about drugs or guns than there is about the sorts of white-collar crimes, fraud and tax evasion and all sorts of deceit. So inherently more dangerous that you should be sentenced to dramatically more time.
Now, not all white-collar crimes are created equal. Financial criminals do occasionally get the book thrown at them. Former Enron CEO Jeffrey Skilling was convicted of fraud in 2006. The Enron scheme cost thousands of employees their jobs and retirement savings. He served 12 years and was released just this year. And Ponzi scheme mastermind Bernie Madoff stole billions from his victims. Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 felonies, and he was actually sentenced to the maximum the guidelines would allow, 150 years. But those were exceptionally high-profile crimes with identifiable victims. More often, white-collar crimes are kind of seen as victimless, and the defendants end up with sentences the average drug dealer would be lucky to get. At tomorrow's hearing, Manafort could get as many as 10 years. In determining his sentence, Judge Berman Jackson can take into account Manafort's other crimes, as well as the sentence he was given in Virginia and his behavior since being indicted. And in a way, there is a victim here: the justice system itself. Manafort literally tried to obstruct justice. So maybe she'll give him the full decade. Luckily for Manafort, it's up to the judge.
Oh, I can't live here no more, man. There's no way.
I wouldn't.
You can paint this up, you can do whatever, you can make it beautiful, but it won't be the same, man. Kid feels safe in a house like this, man.
The second we drove by over here, my wife was like, we gotta get a gun.
Yeah.
And she hates guns. She's not even about having guns in the house. We gotta get a gun.
This is the house that Ken Jenkins and Devin Mead live in with their 2 sons. A little over a week ago, someone spray painted this on the front of the house.
How did you realize that this was on the wall?
I'm standing on my porch right here, and I'm smoking a cigarette, and there's snow outside, and I noticed footprints kind of going both ways. And I was like, well, that's a little off, like, let me come see what's going on. And I kind of look at my footprints, and I see paint on my walls.
He just basically came inside and said, take a deep breath, I have to show you something. And so, yeah, then I came outside.
What was the first thing you thought?
I kept thinking, how did somebody get this close to my house? I was inside.
And then I noticed the noose above my seat. That's very personal. That's a death threat to me. I mean, this person, that's one step away from that person coming into my house and my kids being the first thing they see sitting on the floor watching cartoons.
The couple called police right after they discovered the graffiti. Denver PD told Vice News that the incident is being investigated by detectives trained to deal with hate crimes. Today, police released security camera pictures showing what they say is the man who committed the crime and the car he used. They're looking for help identifying him.
There's no words for it, really. I mean, to me, this is stuff you see in history books. Like, you see this right next to a cross or a noose, somebody hanging up, or stuff you read about. Yeah, I mean, it's 2019.
Most people would have painted over the graffiti immediately, but Ken decided to leave it up.
Walk me through that decision, because you got a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old black boys that you're raising in that house, and you decided to leave the word nigger on the front of the house.
It's hard to explain that decision. I stayed up till probably 2:30 in the morning. Once I got past the anger, I had to start thinking of my kids. And I had already told my wife, you're gonna take the boys out the back when you take them to school. I don't want them to see this. But while I'm thinking that through, I'm like, I'm gonna hide this from my son? That would be wrong of me.
A lot of parents would say, yes, I'm going to hide this from my son.
But you won't talk about it. You won't change anything if you don't. How would your son understand it later when he deals with it?
Ken says the next morning, a neighbor posted pictures of the house on Facebook, and it started to go viral. Police showed up again. This time, they brought a maintenance crew and offered to paint over the graffiti.
I said, no, you guys want to shut me up? If you guys paint my house right now, this all goes away. Nobody's going to talk about this. Nobody's going to hear about this. And then what if it happens to somebody else?
Why is it that you don't want it to go away?
Because I want people to talk. I want people to make some changes.
Ken and Devin's house has become a weird tourist attraction.
Does that happen a lot when people come up and take pictures?
All day long.
Really?
Yeah. As soon as the sun comes up until the sun goes down.
Can I step in here and take pictures?
What is that like?
Overwhelming.
Did you expect that?
Not at all. No. It's constant, but it's good.
It's good?
Yeah, it is good because, the conversation's happening. And people are able to express how they feel about it. And overall, that's a good message.
I got people driving from 2 hours away here to come see this or come meet me or...
You got people coming from 2 hours to look at this.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Take pictures, look at it, post it, share it. Tell me that, basically that they're proud of us and happy that we left this up.
This is now part of your history because you live here.
Yeah, I am black and I'm in this neighborhood right over there. I don't know what whoever spray painted on there, I don't know if that's just their intentions towards them or if it's towards every single black person out there, you know what I'm saying?
It's been a week now.
Yeah.
Do you think it's been up too long?
I think it's about time for it to come down.
How are you feeling about the effect that it's had?
Obviously I feel like if you leave it up too long, it could definitely start causing some harm. It doesn't need to be up anymore. I mean, I've already scheduled the painting to get done, so.
How do you think it's gonna feel coming back home the day that it's been painted over?
It still will never be the same.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't stay here. It would always be here.
It'll always be in the air.
I would feel like if I painted this, I would still see nigger through it. And that bothers me. It's gonna never be the same.
That afternoon, Ken told a local activist that he was ready to take down the graffiti. The next morning, before Ken and Devin woke up, the graffiti had been painted over.
After an investigation dubbed Operation Varsity Blues, federal prosecutors today charged 50 people with carrying out a major college admissions scam. The number includes exam administrators, college coaches, and 33 parents, 2 of whom are actresses Felicity Huffman and Loughlin. Prosecutors allege that parents paid the owner of a purported charity to do things like fake test scores, bribe test administrators to let students cheat on SATs and ACTs, and bribe coaches to name their kids as athletic recruits.
We're not talking about donating a building so that a school's more likely to take your son or daughter. We're talking about deception and fraud. Fake test scores, fake athletic credentials, fake photographs, bribed college officials.
The scandal's an extreme example of the desperation and stress that now surround the college admissions process. A process that only the people in charge of it, admissions officers, really understand.
You are evaluating and letting someone in based on paper.
We are making decisions that could impact kids' futures, not just the 4 years where they go to college, but all the networks that they establish.
You have to try to read between the lines and make really good decisions on the information that you're given.
Just because you're a good kid, just because you get exceptional grades and you deserve an acceptance, doesn't mean you're going to get it.
We are not sort of old white men in frumpy coats with, the arm and elbow patches on our blazers. Very young folks who are excited about their work, who are getting together to make some tough decisions.
You're sitting around a table and you're talking about students one by one individually. People are advocating, people are critical pieces that might be helpful or maybe not as helpful.
When you're going through thousands of applications, you have to go for the girl from the school that did the thing and the who.
That girl who wants to study public policy, the one who volunteered on Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Here's like the Stuyvesant math team captain.
All admissions officers, we all have personal biases based on how we grew up. I was a public school kid who, had a guidance counselor that didn't even know the colleges on my list. So I was always rooting for that public school kid who didn't have a lot of resources.
I would always advocate for newspaper kids who are interested in sort of making the world and their communities a better place. So all you have to do is, talk about sort of women's rights or the Student Diversity Leadership Conference. I was all over you, okay?
I had a soft spot for kids who were from poverty. We're people, and we all kind of gravitate towards our own personal experience.
Neither of my parents went to college, and so I will always fight for those kids. I think they face an uphill battle in the selection process.
Applicants who played instruments, if you were a pianist or a violinist, I was all over that.
Growing up as in a really homogenous white affluent town, I really struggled with my self-identity, with being non-white. When a student was applying that might have been marginalized, oftentimes students of color, first-generation students, it was easy for me to advocate for those kids.
And of course, young women, right? Young women and young women of color. I'm just gonna keep it real. Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, in there. I was all over you. So yes, I have a lot of biases. Oh, get that in check.
The last place I read was fairly diverse as far as ethnicity, but I will also let you know there's something called classism in this country. I mean, if someone's been to prep schools all their life and they're African American, that's a very different experience than someone in inner city Baltimore.
I very often had to sort of push back against other colleagues' implicit bias. Just because a young African-American applicant is coming from an affluent background doesn't mean that student is exempt from or has not experienced sort of the systematic racism and discrimination that lots of folks of color in this country face.
What always helps students, if family had a lot of financial resources, you were really looking at 7-figure donations, 8-figure donations, but sometimes 6 figures plus a connection with someone on the board was even more powerful.
Unless we start looking at colleges like businesses, there's really not going to be enough change to really kind of turn the tides and really kind of give underrepresented students a really big platform.
I think a lot of these really tough to get into places have a lot of devotion to legacy admissions, and it perpetuates these cycles of the haves every year.
It was very sobering to learn that there are so many spots reserved for certain students, whether it is legacy students, whether it is development cases, either their parents have already given significant money to the institution or plan to. Once you fill up your class with those institutional priorities, there isn't a whole lot of room left for regular kids who are absolutely extraordinary, but no one is fighting for them.